Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a deck profile that's a little bit different. Today we're taking a look at the build that I've used in the most recent season of Master Duel in order to get up to Master Rank. It was the first time that I did it. I didn't really do too much with it on release of that new tier, but here we are. We fought through Tier 0, literally beat Ishizu tier as a final boss, and got promoted the other day. So I wanted to share my thoughts on this list because it's different. We already did a Let's Build on the theme for Live Twin Spright, but Master Duel itself is a different format, and this is obviously a bit more competitive than some of the other things that I usually do. So I just wanted to go and share some of my thoughts on this. Starting off with the main deck, we have 3 copies of Max C. Of course, this is Max C, you play 3 copies of it, but the 2 things you want to keep in mind in this deck are, 1, it is a level 2 monster, so you can actually use it to start off your Spright plays if you don't have any other level 2. And 2nd, when you're trying to play around something like Called by the Grave, Called by the Grave has to be the thing that banishes the Max C, and if you end up getting rid of it yourself from the graveyard, it no longer gets negated. That's something very relevant here because you can get rid of it with something like Spright Double Cross or Spright Elf. That'll remove it from the graveyard so your opponent can't touch it with Called by the Grave and force your Max C through, and that definitely comes up a ton in this deck because you often end on one or both of those cards. Next, we have 2 copies of Kishikil and 3 copies of Duel. These do the same kinds of things if you've seen the Live Twin Let's Build that I've done, but effectively we play 3 Rila because Rila is going to search you this extender who gets you a free draw, and that's very powerful, versus Kishikil gets you the Treat. I did play around with Treat for a very short portion of time, but I found ultimately I didn't really need it, even with the alternative search target for Sunny Snitch. Yeah, you can use it to play around hand traps, so it's something you could consider. I just did not think it was worthwhile for consistency's sake because you already have all these other Spright names that will be your extenders for this deck. Speaking of which, Master Duel is different because we have 2 copies of Blue. You obviously play the maximum in the strategy, as well as 2 copies of Jet, but I think it's plenty, honestly. You're still able to go ahead and consistently access these through your extra deck. You're fine, honestly, with 2 copies of each. And then Carrot and Red especially, I mainly have played with 1 copy of each, but I actually experimented with 2 copies of each of these, and I did quite like them, especially as soon as we got hits to Blue and to Jet. But realistically, I just wanted different kinds of counterplay to the meta that Master Duel had, and so that's where those 2 kind of tech slots ended up going to a lot of things. There was a period of time where I went more into the twins, like the 3rd Kishikil and the 3rd copy of Sunny Snitch. There were times when I went and played like evenly matched or things like that. Ultimately, it ended up being Ghost Spell in this particular build, but you could play more copies of Red or Carrot if you'd like to. And then I do like the Pixies because a lot of times people try to beat over your guys, especially your IP or Evil Twins, and you can just elf back your blue, search the Spright Pixies, and then protect your board, especially with a reduced count in Spright without the complete annihilation of access to the engine. I do think it's worth having the 1 copy of Pixies in this particular build. Then we play 3 copies of Ash Blossom in addition to the general utility against things like Branded, which are obviously very popular in Master Duel. You also have the extra utility against Max C in particular, so it's very important in Master Duel specifically. Ghost Belt, Tear Laments are everywhere, the Ishizu cards are annoying, Bystials are annoying, and on top of that, you can use this to stop things like Big Welcome Labyrinth, which just got released in Master Duel as well, among some other things. Called by the Grave can be stopped by this, so all around very useful card. And don't forget with the Ghost Sisters here that even though they are not level 2 monsters, your Link monsters need 2 monsters, including a level Link rank 2 monster. And so you can still normal summon these if like your board is in shambles but still happens to have like a stray Jet that was used up or something. So don't forget that aspect of it. Sometimes does come up, especially when you play tons and tons of games. For spells, we're playing 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. I've played around with a lot of different numbers from 3, 2, and 0 of this thing, but I really did like having 2, especially with Tears, Ishizu cards, of course, and Bystials. This thing becomes way more live than it was just a few months ago. We play 1 secret password to search the 2 Sunny Snitch. This effectively gives us 3 copies of these, including these 5 here. That's 8 copies of the twins to start. This is in here specifically because it baits Ash Blossom without losing to Droll and Lockbird. Unlike in the TCG right now, Droll is not that popular in Master Duel, so it's worth using this as an additional deck thinner so that you don't draw into dead Live Twin cards later after comboing. Again, if your opponent does respond with Ash Blossom, you just laugh because you probably have one of your other plays and you just keep going on from there. This thing also has that extra burn effect and lifesteal effect. Don't forget about that. That can help you win games. And I really do like how in Master Duel, it does all of that for you, so you don't have to like keep track of every single instance of 200 lifesteal per summon. We play the 2 Call by the Graves, much like Ash Blossom, to stop Max C, and then similarly we play the 1 Crossout Designator because that will let us stop the Max C as well, but this is a bit more flexible and that can help us stop other hand traps in addition to that. 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. As long as Arise Heart is not in the game, I am willing to play 3 copies of this in the main deck. It may change depending on, you know, Kashtira upcoming in Master Duel at some point, I would assume. This may end up not being played because Master Duel, again, does not have a side deck system, but for right now, it is incredibly powerful in this deck because when you have one of your twins, their only stipulation is on summon. There are no other monsters on your side of the field. Basically, use one to summon the other. After you get rid of the initial one you summon with Droplet, that gets you at least 1 free negation, clears your board. The new one that's summoned is also able to summon out its corresponding card as well. I play the 1 Gamma Burst, just like I mentioned in the TCG deck profile. I just really love how easy it is to close out games with this card. Don't forget it has a second ability. If the games do go longer, you can power up one of your monsters by 1400 until the end of your opponent's next turn, if they even survive, as long as Spright Jet is accessible in multiple copies and multiple times. I think it's very much worth playing the Gamma Burst, in addition to, of course, Smashers, just generic removal. We got 2 copies of Starter. I like the 2 copies, especially with the reduction in counts of Blue and Jet. Play 3 copies of Imperm because it's the most generic hand trap we can play. I despise the fact that they now show you which column has been affected by this. That's, I think, my least favorite change that they've made to Master Duel that I remember, but whatever. It's still a powerful card. You play it because of that. And then a Spright Double Cross. I have a little bit more insight on this since the last deck profile because I've actually gone back and forth with it. There was a period of time where I was playing 0 copies of it, and then I played for a little longer with it as well. Ultimately, I love this thing. I already mentioned that you're able to summon Max C back from your graveyard, so you protect from Call by the Grave and things like that. But in addition, Spright Double Cross being a trap card that's super easy to search. Basically, you're searching it most games going first with Spright Jet, unless your hand is super lacking in bodies, and then, of course, you go Starter. But basically, Double Cross allows you to flexibly summon back a monster from either graveyard. Even if it's your own guy before your opponent's made a play, you can do that during your opponent's draw or standby phase, whereas you have to wait until your opponent has done the first action as turn player in their main phase for something like Elf or IP Masquerena. So Double Cross getting around that makes it a lot more flexible, and I just really love it. Plus the fact that you could just steal a monster literally just feels like Triple Tactics talent. You can even put it under your Gigantic Spright, for example, if you really need to. In this deck, don't forget, in addition to the sprites, you also have the twins who will often provide you open zones as well, and so this card is very difficult to make dead. So that's the main deck here. Then for our extra deck, we have the Zeus package with Sky Cavalry, Centaria, Downward Magician, and Zeus. Even if Shadow Mosquito were out, I think in Master Duel in particular, with how popular branded it is worth considering Sky Cavalry, because this thing can return your opponent's Mirror Jade to their extra deck where it will not trigger with modern rules. For right now, only option, but probably justified option. We have 2 copies of Gigantic Spright. I played around with one, but I felt of all the Spright monsters, Gigantic is the one that I liked having 2 copies of, because rather than having some additional utility in the main deck, I just loved the grind game aspect of having an additional way to summon out a monster, because then you can follow up with things like Jet, Gamma Burst. Personal preference, I just like the 2. Then we have IP Masquerena. This is something you often end on in both TCG and Master Duel, which will let you go into either your Nightmare Griffin or your Unchained Abomination, which will let you lock your opponent out of their fusions, for example, against Branded, or Tearlaments if they don't have a way to out this thing. And then Unchained Abomination just stacked up with Lila gives you so many pops back to back to back that you can just finish your daily missions, which is of course the most important thing, and win some games along the way. And then for the twins, we play 2 each of Kishikil and Lila because I don't like losing them completely to Bestials. In addition, if you don't have IP Masquerena to set up an interruption, you can at the very least take your final board of Kishikil and Lila as those 2 link monsters and turn both of them into probably your spare copy of Kishikil, so that next turn you can bring back your Lila for free and then get a pop off of that. So that lets you set up a disruption if you don't have it already. 1 elf. I played around with 2 for the longest time, recently changed to 1 copy, and then climbed from Diamond to Master. Not because that specifically made the biggest difference or anything, but you don't need as much of a grind game aspect with elf specifically. 1, because I'm not used to it, honestly, as a TCG player, but also the fact that you have your twins and you still have access access to like second gigantic for the jet for the gamma burst means you don't really care all that much about a second elf in this deck realistically. So 1 is fine. And then Sprint, 9 times out of 10 you don't even play this card in this deck because you don't have something like the Nimble package in order to capitalize on it. But very, very rarely you do need to go and use 2 of your monsters to summon out a Sprint and then extend with another one, turn those into gigantic, and then between those you set up the live twins. You play the 1 copy of Trouble Sunny. This is actually something that I'll remind you guys because I forgot about it as a twin player because I haven't seen it in too long. You can send any evil twin monster from your hand, field, or deck to the graveyard to send a card non-targeting. That effect I haven't used all that much at all. In fact, I don't even remember the last time I used that in Spright twins specifically. But even though we don't play the brick, don't forget you can send one of your twins to the graveyard from your field in order to use that effect, and then the twin can bring the other one back that you just sent to the graveyard as cost. So having access to this nice removal option, especially as you clean up going into turn 3 or whatever, your second turn, you're able to get extra value out of this, potentially. I say potentially because I haven't really had it come out too much because I just use the Gamma Burst and win anyway. You have more than enough resources to win, but it sometimes does happen where you have to out some annoying cards your opponent has, like Floodgates or whatever. This card will let you do that, and you can use your on-field evil twins to do so. And that's another reason why I like having a second copy of each of these, because then you can go and complete the combo again. Muckraker is now in the game, so you could do that instead of one of these, but I just have always been a fan of playing the 2 copies of each of these, and I wouldn't really play Muckraker over Spright Elf in this deck because why discard a card and lock yourself into Fiends when you can just play Spright Elf for literally every 2-axis card in your deck? Like, it's a no-brainer. Play Elf in this specific deck, at least until that ever gets hit, potentially. But that's basically going to do it for now. In case you missed it, at the very top you could see the cost of this deck is 990 URs and 300 SRs, but you do have a handful of cards that you get from like the little packs early on in the game. Like you got the Ash Blossom, you got the Imperm, the Droplet, so shouldn't be too terrible, I would imagine. But yeah, this is the deck I've been playing for a long time with a ton of iterations that kind of mentioned along the way. Hopefully it was something interesting for you guys to see. I was very happy to get an opportunity to bring twins up to this level because I haven't really played too competitively despite having good knowledge of the game, I believe. Like I've been playing basically since the beginning of the game. Like a couple months into it, my friend showed it to me, and I've never had a locals or anything, so I never really had a consistent way of getting a tournament experience, but I've always, done my homework, read up on stuff. Master Duel has been the first time I've been able to consistently keep up with some competitive form of Yu-Gi-Oh! And at the end of the day, even though Master Duel is a different format, it's still Yu-Gi-Oh! Still apply a lot of knowledge and stuff, and it's been a lot of fun, so I'm very happy I was able to take kind of a pet deck that became meta into the level that we ended up getting it. So that's gonna do it for now, guys. This is JD Gaming. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.